Okay, so I've continued beading all the way down. I'm going to measure. It's just below 7 inches, so it'll add on half an inch. I'm shooting for just over 7 1/4, so that's perfect. And what you're going to do is flip your board over and undo this knot that you placed in the back. You're going to keep this on though. I'm going to flip it back over. And so this is a good time to make sure that you didn't do this too tightly. You can see that it's kind of curving on its own, so I did it a little bit tighter than I probably should have, and I'll go and show you how to fix that. But first I'm going to take a binder clip and just clip this tail of your scrap material down. You don't want to clip it here because you might pinch this and damage your piece, so that just keeps it free. So since it was a little bit tight, I'm just going to take my fingers, run it down the beads before I secure the ends. That way the beads have freedom to move down. So that's kind of loosened it up a little bit, which is better. And then I have my last bead. Then you're going to, or you can just cut it off. I'm just going to cut it off for the sake of time. So you're going to do the same thing again in the same direction as before. You're going to just wrap around your tails twice. Keep that last bead where it should be. So you're going to snug it up. And then now for the loop, I'm going to braid these tails together because I don't want just a single strand of this soft material taking the full force of the bracelet, because it is silk, so it's nice to reinforce it. So keeping it taut, you're just going to start to braid. And I'm keeping the board in place with my wrist. So if you have a ledge on your design table, it helps too. Or if you're doing it in your lap, you can use your legs. So I'm going to braid down for a good length. Keep going. This is a lot more than I'm going to need, but it's nice to have a really big tail to work with. It just makes the ending silk wrapping job easier. And then to keep that in place, I'm just going to tie an overhand knot. This is all going to get cut off. So now you have an end like this. Now you're going to take your scrap piece out. And then you're going to have a piece of your Superlon pre-cut for the last silk wrap. Just set that to the side. So you're going to take your bracelet. And this is a good time to test fit to make sure that it is the proper length. That's exactly where I want it. So now I'm going to fold this over. Then you're just going to start with the random length. It's a little big. It could pop out of there a little bit easier. So I'm going to size it down just a little bit. Do keep in mind that you're going to be putting a silk wrap in there. And it's going to come up to about here. So now that's a little bit snug. So I took too much down. And just be patient. You want to get the right size, because if it's too small, your button's going to end up putting a lot of wear and tear on this loop, and it might end up, rubbing it down and marring it over time, so it'll break. So now you're going to silk wrap just like you did before. And you just nip the tail off, making sure, again, not to get your silk wrap. So there you go. You have your finished bracelet. And then this is the sample where I just would go around one time. And you can see it makes for a much looser look. And then I also used 2 strands of different colored silk cord. So once you get the technique down, you can really start playing around with using different frames. This one I use different widths of beads to kind of give it a cinched in look, and it's just really fun to play with. Now if you're going to use a heavier framing material, this is some waxed cotton that we carry. It's really nice to work with, but it requires a different finishing. You can see I did start it the same way. I fed my framing material in, and then I fed the Super Lawn 18 through. This one I used some glass beads, and this one I made so it wrapped 3 times. So this one is 21 inches, and then I put this little extender on just because I wasn't sure who was going to end up with it, so I wanted them to have some playroom for it to be shorter or longer. And I used Super Lawn size 18 on this one, and the same technique does work even with the thicker stringy material. The one that I have prepped is waxed cotton, and I used size D, but the same concept applies. So I brought it to the end, and I have my free strands. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to lock that bead in place by bringing my beading cord around my framing cord twice. And this time, since this is a little stiff and bulky to silk wrap, I decided to go with overhand knots as opposed to silk wraps. And I don't like the idea. A lot of these bracelets that you'll see in department stores or little boutiques, they'll take the beading cord, make sure to leave a little bit of a gap so that that bead doesn't want to pop out. Try to get it a little bit even with the triangle. You'll see that they'll take this cord and they'll just tie overhand knots right by the bead and cut it off. You'll also notice that about half of those bracelets are broken right where they tie it. So I was looking to avoid that. So I bring the cord not only into the knot, but I come back with the tails and I use a sewing needle. And I reinforce it into the knot. So not only does it keep this knot in place and from coming undone, but it keeps these tails from coming out at all. So with your pliers, be very careful and make sure to pull away from your face and your hands and down into something that can be stabbed with this needle. Because sometimes with the thicker stringy materials, especially if you're using the 18 and doing this, it can get a little dangerous. So you pull it through once. I like to do it 3 times per tail, but you can do it 2. And do try to pay attention to how your stitch is going to fit with the rest of your knot, because it is a little bit visible and you don't want zigzags on your knot. So you pull that through. And then one last time, don't stab yourself with the needle. And there's that one. And then I just cut it immediately after I do that. And that tail isn't going anywhere. And then I come back with the other tail. Thread your sewing needle. Don't use too fine of a needle because you can snap it off. Just go ahead and use a heavy one. It's also easier to thread. I'm going to pull it through once, make sure the doubled over tail comes through, back through, and then just once more. This will keep the tails from coming out, and it will also keep your knot from coming undone. Then you snip it, and then to get the extender look going, all you do, you tie an overhand knot. Don't pull it all the way taut until you test fit your clasp. So here's the clasp. I'm going to make sure it fits through. And it does. So it's not too big, not too small. Pull that one tight. And now with these last knots, if you want to come in with some hypo cement, I'm not a fan of the slather your knot technique because I find that the glue as it ages looks very unattractive when you do that. But because of this little tip, you can actually get the glue inside the knot, squeeze some out until you feel some resistance in the tube. You don't need a lot. It's a cement, so it'll dry and it'll harden and it will keep that knot in place. And then you can put a little bit on the top if you really want. So there's that one, and then I'm going to tie one more knot. This is also handy if you find that you've made it just a little bit too short. And then you do the same thing. Just stick the tip in the middle. Squeeze until you feel some resistance, and to keep it from gooping out on you while it's still in there, and you don't care where the glue is really going. Back it back out. And then since this is going to be the end that you snip, putting just a little bit up here to keep the tail secured is perfectly fine. And then you'll want to wait until this glue dries before you snip the tails off. But when you do snip them off, don't snip them flush. You'll want to leave a little bit hanging out. Pretend like my glue has dried. And then you have your wax linen bracelet.